Hello and welcome to episode
10.
10. We're on the final episode of season 1.
Yeah, oh
And
God.
today we're going to wrap up with a really extra special episode. Really great topic today to talk about.
Yeah, and that is men's mental health. We are officially in the month of June, which is men's mental health. And we just want to raise a little bit more awareness about what is men's mental health and how important it is to talk about it and how little information is out there about this topic.
Yeah, and I think it's so important as well for anybody that's watching to be aware of this. It could well be that, your partner or your husband or your dad or, anyone around you is struggling and they're not sure how to approach it. So I think it's a really important topic.
I know. And also I don't know, I mean, I'm going straight in because I feel like I have to, but it's the stigma around the whole thing. And I feel like that's the biggest issue, is that men in general don't know how to approach mental health. They don't know who to turn and talk to. And is the society, what we've built over years, is a big stigma of men being really masculine and, having to not talk about their problems. And if you do talk about any sort of emotional situation or problems, you are classed probably as weak and you've not got your shit together.
Yeah.
And I think that's far from it. I think, in all honesty, we're all human. Regardless of gender, women are naturally more emotional. Men can be emotional, and I think it's important that we speak about it and raise awareness that you can talk and it's perfectly normal and it's not weakness at all.
I think as well, given the fact that suicide rates in the UK now are predominantly male.
Yeah.
So males between the ages of 40 and 49 actually have the highest risk of death by suicide in the whole of the UK.
And I see that to me is just nuts. In all, like, at that, it's young. That's really, really young if you think about it. And I think the biggest one to blame, I think, is the society, because there's this, you have to have it all figured out by a certain age, don't you? Apparently, like
it's toxic masculinity, isn't it? It's that. It's like when we spoke about those kinds of societal expectations on women and the pressures to look a certain way in episodes 4 and unrealistic beauty standards. I guess we're talking about the same thing, kind of in parallel to men, just with money, status, power, expecting to be the provider, but then how are men portrayed in the media too is a huge thing.
Again, social media, we go back to, I think that's the biggest issue, because it's so easy for someone just to go online and see all these things. You have to be this. If you don't do this, you're not man enough. You're not strong enough. You can't go wimping around. Like, that's all. I mean, I'm seen as a woman. Like, I can only imagine what it's like for a man, and it makes me feel uncomfortable as a woman to look at all these videos that are available on social media, and you think, hang on a minute, this is not accurate whatsoever. I understand that men in general for centuries have been, the strongest. Like, we're not denying that men are stronger than women physically, but we also have to remember that men also have emotions, and men do, express their emotions differently than women. I think that's another important thing to acknowledge, because we women probably cry more. We have our circles maybe a bit tighter as women, meet up, talk about our problems, we're there for each other. But I genuinely don't think that men have that. And, you go out with your friends, as with the lads out, I don't know, play golf, football, whatever it might be. You don't really talk about you, how you are. It's like, oh, you okay? And it literally just finishes there, and it's very surface level. And I just feel like men need to be encouraged to open these uncomfortable conversations with their friends and kind of create this environment where they feel safe to go and speak to their friends and to check in more, to be like, okay, well, even if one of my friends seems to have it all figured out on paper and on the surface level, you still have to speak to them and ask them if they're okay or if they want to talk about it. And maybe if they don't want to talk about it today, insist, make sure you do still check in and still open the conversation. And I understand that, men's banter, men's conversations are completely different to what women's are like. And I think that, again, can be approached in a different way and just kind of create a very safe environment for your friend group to be able to do that and not feel ashamed.
I think, you've picked up on a few valid points there. And I think for the purposes of this kind of particular episodes, I'm going to throw out some kind of quite a lot of facts and figures and just keep it really kind of straight talking. If there are any kinds of men out there listening, you come back to this idea of social media and the pressure of social media. And there's been a recent study put out there that actually 47% of men polled in this study actually felt intimidated by the online social media world. They felt inferior. They felt as though they couldn't live up to the expectations of what it was to be a man. Now, 47% is near enough half of the men who responded to that study. And I think it goes to kind of show a lot that actually it's probably a lot more than that who are willing to actually admit it, like you say, and address this issue of toxic masculinity and what it actually means to be a man. And then, you're saying, the conversations that men have with their friends and, what it is actually like to kind of speak about your emotions and how they express their emotions in a different way. I think men generally tend to externalize a lot of their emotions through their behaviors. So whether that's, they go and work out, whether that's they become angry or aggressive, whether that's they shut off from people and, alienate friends and family or react or respond in maybe a not very positive way towards people. A lot of that then has impacts on your social world and how then people respond to you because of the way that you're perceived in that aggressive or threatening way, when really it could be down to stress or anxiety or worry.
I know, and do you know what? That figure, by the way, that is too high for anyone. I think that is quite shocking. And also I'm thinking, well, it makes me think that men might not know the difference between depression and stress. There's a big gap there. Like they don't. How have we come to the situation where men can't just turn around and say, I think I'm depressed or I think I'm stressed? Or
I think you may not knowing the kinds of the difference between depression and stress, I think is a huge one, because at what point do men actually step out and say, like you said, actually I'm feeling really, really low, or, they're getting tearful. So quite often a lot of the symptoms of depression that you would generally see attributed to women. So maybe, feeling really more, tearful or, not maybe feeling like you can kind of complete your activities or socialize. I think a lot of men just power through and just keep going and going and going because they don't want to admit that there's something wrong. And what that does is it just builds up inside. It's not going anywhere. It's still there until it erupts or it explodes in some other way.
And I do understand, obviously, when you hear all of these, things on Instagram and, I don't want to drop names and who's very famous for advertising this type of, stigma around men. But I just feel like, okay, men being strong is a really good thing, and I think that we need men in this world to be strong and look after women in a way. But I also believe that you know, even us as women, we need to acknowledge that men do have emotions and they're human, and we need to acknowledge that as ourselves as women, that maybe sometimes if my man comes home, or your brother or whoever it is, and they seem a bit moody, they seem under a lot of stress, do have a conversation with them. Don't just, you know, assume that they're just going to get on with it and they're going to be okay with it. I think a simple conversation sometimes, it goes a long way, and it can either make that man open themselves up and say, actually, I'm feeling a bit down today. I don't know why, because they might not know why, because they might be confused about their emotions and how they're feeling. It might be stress with work, with, you know, stress in where they are in life, you know, and now we've got an age gap, like, where you've got to have it figured out by a certain age for a man. And it's just like, not everyone would have a successful career by 30. They're just not, you know, you're still growing up, you're still understanding things about yourself. And I think it kind of just plays a little bit into what the society's like and how we've built this into almost like it backfired a little bit, because it's like, okay, let's just make men strong and encourage them to be tough and go out there and take risks and everything. But hang on a minute, how about their mental health?
But I think as well, I'm just going to come back to something that you said there. I think that whole idea of men being expected to take care of a woman actually plays a lot into that stereotypical gender type. And I think this stems back from childhood. You know, how are you raising your children? Are you raising your son to believe that his role in life is to take care of a woman and be the breadwinner and stay strong? And, you know, boys don't cry. You've got to power through no matter what. You've got to hide your emotions. That's what he sees the traditional role of the family being. Then, you know, what you're instilling into your child from a very early age is those coping styles or strategies, that internal working model of actually, you know, it's not safe to talk about your emotions. It's not safe to expect, you know, an equal relationship because you have certain kinds of expectations on you as a man. That actually can be quite damaging if you're not able to fulfill them. And in actual fact, what we're saying is, you know, I'm not saying it's wrong for any particular type of role, because people live quite happy, healthy relationships in those traditional gender roles. What we're actually saying is that we shouldn't have that expectation on people. You know, it shouldn't be expected that, you know, boys don't cry, or you have to man up, or boys don't talk about their emotions. And look, at this moment in time, the current research estimates 100 million men across the world are suffering some form of depression right now. And I actually think that's grossly underestimated, because a lot of men won't admit that they're struggling. So this is common. You know, this is really, really common, what we're speaking about. Depression in men, you know, low mood, stress, anxiety. It's a normal part and parcel of being human, you know, having those negative emotions. It's actually how you manage them, and how you manage them is how you've learned to deal with them from a young age. And if you haven't learned to deal with them in a healthy way from a young age, that's not to say that you can't learn how to manage them now, but it's going to be a lot harder. So I guess the message is, this has to be something that is spoken about now. It has to break the cycle, break the stigma. Otherwise, it'll just continue through generation after generation.
Well, I do believe that in the recent years, the men and people in general have raised more awareness about men's mental health. This never used to be a thing before. Back in the day, nobody dare mentioned anything to do with men's mental health. It was all more about women, and I'm glad in a way that everyone is opening their eyes, the fact that, you know, okay, we need to nourish the women and look after their emotions, but at the same time we also need to do that for men. And there's not to say that you can't be masculine and you can't be a strong man. what we're saying is that you can still be all those things, but still speak about your emotions with your close family, with your friends. You know, if you can't do that, then you can go and speak to someone that doesn't know you personally, that maybe you feel more comfortable speaking about your emotions to. The point that I'm making is that you need to just go and speak to someone. However, if you're feeling in a way that you don't know how to control, it's so important that you need to speak to someone. And again, men's emotions are, they just come out in such a different way than women. You know, they can get aggressive, they can get, you know, the moods can just fluctuate so quickly. They can go from 1 to 100 in 2 seconds. And that is just down to their buildup of emotion. And, you know, a lot of people go, yeah, but look at him, he's like this and he's like that. What? Well, there's a reason why all of that is bottling up. Because he's probably not speaking about his emotions to anybody, because it has to keep his status. He's got to stay strong. He's got to look after a family. Everything seems to be, I've got to be, you know, the strong person. Yeah, you can. But at the same time, there is safe space out there to speak about how you're feeling. And that's only going to help you do better in your workplace, with your status, you know, with everything that you're going through. And that the bottom line is men's mental health is just as important as women's mental health. That's what I'm trying to say.
And I think a lot of this stems down to stress for men. And I think, you know, you're absolutely right in terms of, you know, speaking out more and men feeling able as though, you know, they have somebody they're able to turn to. But bottom line is, you know, not all men do or feel able to, because there still is that stigma. Yes, we have come a long way, but also we've got a long, long way to go, I think. And that's why it's so important, why these awareness months are, you know, out there, so that it generates conversation. But I think for me, you know, kind of following the research, a lot of it is down to how men handle stress and being aware of how stress impacts them, and also taking ownership of being able to manage their own levels of stress. So I think for men in particular, you know, there's an element of losing control. So not feeling as though if they speak to somebody, they'll lose control. Not in a sense of, you know, themselves, aggressiveness, but losing their status, losing their power, losing, you know, face in front of a certain friendship group, or losing a kind of certain status in work, for example. And that loss of control is frightening and it's scary and it's unknown. However, it's kind of flipping the narrative. Actually, what you're doing by managing your stress and taking steps to reduce it is you're taking back control, because ultimately only you have the power of your own mental health, your own mental well-being. And, you know, I've spoken about this before in our other episodes. It's the day-to-day steps that you take that protects your mental health and protects your mental well-being. And I think for men in particular, they find it difficult to engage in self-care. You know, yeah, they may go out with their friends or whatever, but they tend to do, and this is not kind of making sweeping generalizations, this is just generally going off the main body of research, men tend to do things more isolated than women. So women are a lot more sociable in the sense that they'll go shopping with friends, or they'll meet for coffee with friends, or, you know, they'll chat on the phone, or they'll have FaceTime groups or WhatsApp groups, whereas men tend to do a lot of things in isolation. So yeah, they may go out and play golf. You know, they may not talk while they're doing it. They may go out and, you know, go to the gym on their own, or go for a cycle on their own, or just go shopping on their own. They tend to do things in isolation, and that is another big risk factor for kind of mental health problems later on in life. So I think you need to be massively aware of stress and how to reduce stress before it builds up into something unmanageable.
Yeah, and also just to say that it's normal to be stressed. I mean, come on. Like, we're all at one point going to deal with stress, and it's inevitable. It's going to happen. And this applies to men and women. Stress is a normal part of life. It happens every day. It can be different types of stress. And I just think that, just generalizing and saying men deal with stress better than women, I think it's wrong, because I don't think that's accurate at all. I think men sometimes don't know how to deal with their emotions and with stress. And
I actually think it's the opposite, if I'm honest with you. I actually think that, men may find it more difficult to spot the signs of stress. And I think a lot of it is down to that kind of, like we said before, we just power through. We've got to keep going. I've got a family to provide for, I've got work to get through. I want to get to the next level of my career progression, or I have to earn a certain amount of money. So I think men are more prone to ignoring the signs of stress because of societal pressures around them.
Yeah, that is true. And I mean, if you think about it, the pressure that we have put on men as a society it's actually quite disgusting if you think about it. But it's what the reality of things is at the moment, and we're seeing it all the time. And just something that I wanted to mention, obviously we know is mental health for men at the moment, the month of June. I've actually not seen a lot of awareness about it, like on my feed, for example. And I know that that's quite silly to say, but normally this flooded with information and mental health and everything. And if it wasn't for us two having this conversation and you being in the field and, having these chats before, I would have probably not known that it is Men's Mental Health Month this month. I wouldn't have had a clue.
Yeah, there's
just absolutely no noise about it. And that's what shocked me, because I was having a conversation with you and I said, honestly, if it wasn't for us having this chat, I wouldn't have a clue that it's actually happening. And it's that's interesting for me, because it's all social media, so it's generated by the algorithm and how it all works. And it just proves how little it's pushed out there about men's mental health. And it's really, really sad.
Yeah. I think as well, kind of, like we say, going back to what they can do about it is recognise the signs of stress, because stress is a normal part and parcel of life. Everybody gets stressed. It's a normal human emotion. It's a biological function. I think what people don't really understand is the huge impact that chronic stress has and the toll it takes on your body and the lifelong implications of that. Stress it's toxic to the body. So if you're consistently kind of working in a really highly stressful environment, for example, or you're stressed over money or debt, your finances, I think eventually what happens is stress releases cortisol, and cortisol can be toxic in high doses. And that can have a really big impact on testosterone levels in men. And I think not a lot of awareness is raised about this, because you hear quite a lot of testosterone being high testosterone and a man being really charged and aggressive, and men who take steroids, for example. Testosterone's a steroid in the body, a natural steroid, but for men who take steroids it makes them quite angry, and there's quite a lot of kind of awareness about that, I think. But on the flip side of it, low testosterone, for example, causes low mood. It causes anxiety. It causes kind of men to feel really tired and lethargic. It causes them to maybe withdraw socially because of how they're feeling. So in turn, low testosterone levels actually impact depression and anxiety. So it increases depression and anxiety rates in men. So cortisol has a direct link on testosterone. It lowers testosterone, it inhibits the production of it. And then testosterone then directly impacts your serotonin release rates, which is your happy kind of chemical in the body. So being highly stressed for long periods of time actually impacts your testosterone levels, and then has a biological impact on your stress and anxiety levels too, and depression.
And that also happens quite early on for men, doesn't it? That's like between in their 40s, actually.
Yeah, so there's a lot of research again on the male menopause, and well, I'm saying there's a lot of research. There's a lot of current research going on. There's not a lot of published research out on it at this moment in time, but men have a natural drop in testosterone as well after the age of 40. And if you kind of link that with the suicide rates that we spoke about earlier, you know, that is hugely significant. But in actual fact, testosterone levels can dip at any age. So if you're chronically stressed in your 20s, that can have a massive impact on your testosterone levels.
Especially if you go into your 30s and you're trying to figure things out and there's a lot of stress happening. I think that, again, research like that, for example, like just not being available for men to read, to understand what's going on, like, why am I feeling like this? Asking that question, like, I'm feeling a bit lethargic, or I'm feeling a bit low, or this is happening. It's a lot of confusion around it if you think about it, because they just don't know where to start and where to go and who to speak to, because it's such a unspoken subject if you think about it. So I think I'm obviously so happy that nowadays we speak about it more, and there's slowly a little bit more information. It's better than nothing, I know, but I think it could be better, in all honesty.
It definitely can be, but I think raising awareness of it is so important, because quite often, I think as well, it's really easy to label men as aggressive, you know, or abusive, and, you know, we're not dismissing anyone's experience. But what we're saying is just kind of maybe inviting people to be a little bit more aware of how men sometimes can struggle in silence, and that can often manifest in externalizing behaviors such as projecting aggressiveness onto their loved ones. And it can just be the start of a conversation to maybe think about what else could be happening there, if it's something that's out of the blue or out of character for that particular person.
Well, that's how it all starts, isn't it? Having that conversation to start with, which men normally don't have at all. Like, they don't speak about it. So there's no such thing as starting a conversation for them. It's just, we don't speak about emotions. That's it. We close the book. So it's not, it's kind of just like encouraging men to even, okay, you're not ready to speak about your emotion. We understand. It's the same with women. Not everyone's ready to speak about their emotions straight away. It's an overwhelming feeling. But being a bit more aware of your friendships groups and what do you guys do? How do you interact with each other when you go out? What do you talk about? Is it just how was your week and just like random things, or do you actually speak about how you guys are feeling? And when you do say how was your week at work, you know, don't just stop there, and maybe just say, are you okay? You know, are you feeling stressed? Or, you know, I'm here if you want to talk. You don't have to get emotional about it, because I think a lot of people, especially men, get a bit scared when we say emotions, when we mention emotional chats. We're not saying, you know, start crying in the middle of your group of mates. We're saying start the conversation, because that's the start of everything.
Yeah, I think there as well. I was just thinking when you were saying that, men like to fix things.
Yeah.
And I think that is half the battle with these conversations with anybody. I think as well, if somebody kind of opens up to you about a bad day or a bad week or something that's going wrong in their life, your automatic response is to want to be able to fix it, to help that person. When in actual fact, when we're talking about mental health and we're talking about emotions, quite often there is no practical quick fix. And the best thing that you can do in those situations is to just validate their experience. And, you know, if your friend does open up to you, or your husband or your dad or anybody that's close to you, the best response to say quite often, if you don't know what to say, is just, you know, gosh, that sounds really, really difficult. I'm so sorry you're going through that. Is there anything else I can do to support you? Rather than not acknowledging the feeling or telling them to man up, or, oh, you'll be okay. You've always got through things like this. Come on, you can do it
or
again.
He'll get on with it. I know he'll get on with it. Like, that's the typical scenario, isn't it? When that's why I'm so strongly about it, because I think that sometimes even us as women can be guilty of it in a way of, like, when, you know, your man is coming home or whatever male figure in your family, you kind of just could, because this is so uncommon and emotions are so rarely spoken about in men, that you half the times don't even acknowledge it. And that, I think that's the biggest problem there, because you're not really acknowledging, oh, he's just stressed. He'll just go and have a beer with his mates. He'll go to the pub. He'll go and play some golf for a couple. You're not really acknowledging it. You're just letting him get on with it. And that, I think that's the problem. And I think just raising a bit more awareness of, be a bit more self-aware and watch what's happening in front of you and see the patterns, because half the times you're just ignoring them, and then you get surprised when you hear about all these tragic, you know, situations that happen in men with suicide and everything, and everyone's so shocked. Oh my goodness, where has this come from? It's because nobody really is paying attention to men's stress or how they deal with it. And I think that's the problem, and that's why everyone's so shocked when they hear about all these, you know, the percentage of suicide rates. I mean, it's ridiculous. It's so high if you think about it.
75% of all suicide rates in the UK are men. So
I mean, that is just, I'm sorry, but that is just nuts. And it just makes me so sad to just think about that.
I think communication is key, because there'll be quite a lot of women out there also thinking, you know, well, in actual fact, they've got a really stressful kind of life. And I think the mental load of that can be really quite overwhelming. And quite often, you know, they may not just have that capacity to be able to think of another thing. And the same goes for men. And I think that lack of acknowledgement of one another's emotional states or stress levels drives people further apart. And I think communication is such a huge factor in this, because I think we live in a time now, you know, where society is so stressful. There's so many more burdens placed on everybody in terms of their time, in terms of their resources, you know, in terms of kind of the economic impact at this moment in time. You know, there's so many variables involved, and I think it can be really quick that festers, particularly in relationships as well, into resentment. You know, well, I do more than you, or, you know, well, you're not doing this. I think we can all recognise those types of arguments. I think the difference is here, what we're saying is nobody's kind of better off or better at kind of, you know, managing things in a certain way or has an easier life. What we're saying is men tend to internalize their emotions for a longer period of time
than women,
which means that actually the repercussions, i.e. the deaths that we see by suicide, are so high in men because they mask it far longer than women tend to.
God, I mean, it just literally comes down to communication, isn't it? If you think about it, because that's how it all starts. If you get into the habit of communicating in your household, genuinely care to speak to your other half, your son, your brother, your cousin, any male figure in your family, I think it's really important, and that's how it all starts. Because after all, there's a pattern. You know, if you get into the habit of communicating with your partner, it's going to come naturally eventually for you to do that, and for you to be able to sit down at dinner table and be like, are you okay? Yeah. How was your day? Yeah,
and
great.
have those conversations as the norm.
As in, it's a normal part of our day. We communicate, we speak about our day. How was it? How can I help? What can I do to help? Are you stressed today? We don't want to say that, men and women are stressed. Women could be staying at home with the kids all day and be really stressed. Men could be going to work all day and be stressed and come home. But what we're saying is that finding the balance and communicating with someone and understanding that if they're stressed today, I'll take over, or I'll help, or let's just sit down and speak. I don't know, just be there, communicate with someone and listen to them, and create a safe environment by communicating all the time. And then it will come naturally eventually, because you know that you're safe to speak.
I think that safe space is so important. I think in order for people to kind of function effectively, they have to feel as though they're emotionally and psychologically safe to be their authentic selves. We say this quite a lot, because it is it's the building blocks of positive well-being. Being able to be true to yourself. But also, what I want to stress is that there is a huge part of this which is also self-driven. So you have to be responsible to take steps for your own positive well-being. And I can think of kind of a lot of men that I've come across that in actual fact don't do that. They don't take care of themselves. They put their family first. They work hard. They're great dads, or they're great parents, or whatever. You couldn't fault them in those ways, but in actual fact they don't look after themselves. And by that I mean, maybe they don't eat healthily, maybe they don't look after themselves physically, maybe they're not having enough sleep or taking time out. They're just working constantly because they think that that's the right thing to do. And I want to make it really, really clear that is the opposite. That's the wrong thing to do, because whilst you think that you might be looking after everybody else, by not taking care of yourself, you're not taking care of everybody else, because it's going to come back and bite everybody on the backside, because it'll come out in unhealthy coping strategies. You might find yourself drinking more, or smoking more, or taking recreational drugs. You might be snappy because you're not sleeping well. It comes out in other ways, and that ultimately is what impacts on your mental health and well-being. So I think a lot of this is taking ownership to actually put boundaries in place and say, no, do you know what? I actually do need to start taking some time for myself. Go in the gym, any form of exercise, in fact, not just go in the gym, but any form of exercise is hugely beneficial for your mental health. It's difficult, we know, but it releases endorphins. So that if you are a man who feels quite highly stressed, highly strung, you're running on adrenaline quite a lot of the time, doing something like exercise, going for walks, engaging just in some form of physical release will really benefit you in that way.
Yeah, and also that comes with, like you said, healthy eating. Obviously, when you start exercising, naturally your body will need to be nourished. So it's these little steps that you think, you know, how do men release stress? Like, how can they just focus on one thing, on one task, and make sure that they release that stress that they've accumulated over time, or in the day, or over the week, or months, or years? I think it's important to find what helps you as a man to release that stress, whether it, obviously in a healthy way, because we know that men can turn to obviously other toxic things like substance abuse and everything else,
and in actual fact, I just want to back you up there with the research, because, you know, there might be some people out there going, oh, you know, you're just kind of slanging that. The research actually shows that men tend to engage in more unhealthy coping strategies, such as drinking and smoking, than women would do.
Yeah. And I mean you can see it. I mean, I think it's quite obvious, and it's sad, obviously, because that's like probably the first thing that they go to. And in actual fact, exercising is probably the healthiest thing you can do for a man to release stress. And speaking to someone, to your friends, is also an important aspect of the whole thing. And, you know, dropping that stigma down and not be embarrassed that you'll be portrayed as being weak, because you're saying to your friends, I'm having a really, really dark time, or I'm really low, or, you know, I've been thinking about this and that. It's really, really important that you have those conversations and you don't feel that you'll be judged. And if you are judged, then so be it. I mean, at the end of the day, your mental health is more important. And I think, in actual fact, as a woman myself, I think that when I see a man owning to something that he's struggling, I find that more attractive, and I respect that a lot more, because it takes an awful lot to do that, and I understand that. To be a bit more self-aware and appreciate when a man does open up to you, because it's very hard, especially in this world that we live in at the moment.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, you know, at the end of the day, we all have to cope and manage with difficult and distressing emotions. And you're going to cope in one way or another. And you cope in the way that you've learned best how to cope. So if you've always been told that, you know, men don't cry, or, you know, we don't speak about that, or no, you must go out and work, then you're going to turn to a different coping strategy that actually may mean that you might not talk about it, or you might lean to kind of drink or drugs or whatever else it is. So it's really important that you start to relearn a healthier way of managing your emotions. I think it's actually a really responsible way of dealing with things.
Yeah.
People have to acknowledge that they're responsible for their own positive well-being and take steps to protect it.
Also, it creates self-respect for a man. I think, you know, when you start looking after yourself and after your well-being, you respect yourself as a man more, and you don't, you know, feel like you're not good enough, or, you know, you're not at this level, or, you know, career and status. I think it kind of builds that internal confidence that you can power through a lot of things, and you can do what you set to do. But you do have to look after your mental well-being. It's like the first thing that you have to do as a man in order to be able to do all the amazing things that you want to do for your family, you know, for your friends, for everyone around you. And also being healthier, it's, you know, it helps everyone else around you. So I think it's just a good way of acknowledging that these steps are very, very good for mental health, and it works better for men in this scenario where they can release a lot of stress by purely just going and exercising, or doing any form of exercise. Like you said, you don't have to go and smash the gym to be manly. You know, you can be doing something else that releases stress for you that's healthy.
I think any small steps that you can take, because people are going to be at lots of different journeys. And I'm thinking of somebody who might be sat there really, really struggling and not know where to begin. And I think, like you've just said, it's small steps. And I think for me, what always gets me is it sounds so simple. And a lot of the time when you're kind of giving out this advice, a lot of people will just be sat there thinking, or they'll say to you, well, you know, all right, yeah, eat healthily, exercise. It's kind of that age old, you know. However, it's really hard to do consistently, and consistency is the key, because you've got to build up those habits. And it's the small steps every single day that, like you said, actually what it does is it builds your internal self-esteem up. So, you know, you start to kind of show up for yourself. You start to reinforce those beliefs that actually you can do it. You know, you can prove to yourself, you can look after yourself, even if it's just, you know, stopping smoking, for example, trying to stop smoking, going for a walk. You know, there's lots of programs out there like the Couch to 5K, for example. If you did just want to start somewhere, it's just to start small, but do it often, so that it becomes a natural part of your routine.
It's like how you have a smoking habit or a drinking habit. That's the exact same if you flip it the other side. Doing something that's good for you and healthy for you, it'll turn into a habit eventually that you won't know any different. And it's just, we always say, and we keep repeating ourselves, but I feel like we have to, small steps, baby steps. It's so important. Baby steps to having that conversation with your friend, opening that conversation, slowly trying to actually even want to open the conversation is better than completely just dismissing it and not acknowledging it. And, you know, I'm so grateful, obviously, that everyone, it's more open-minded to it at the moment. And there's more, you know, talk about it and a bit more noise, and social media is obviously has its bad traits and like the way we see things about men and their mental health, but also has their good, you know, parts where you can raise awareness and you can't say to men, you're all right, you can't speak about your emotions, nobody's going to crucify you for it. It's just a very, very natural human state to be and to have emotions. So I just think that, you know, if I can just say anything to any men out there, just please don't be afraid to talk about your emotions. I think it's a really good quality to have. And as soon as you start looking after yourself, your self-esteem will go up, which naturally you'll carry yourself differently in different scenarios, in different places. And that's only going to help you, you know, grow and feel more manly eventually, that you won't feel like you have to hide your emotions. And I think, you know, baby steps again, guys, baby steps.
I think as well, we never mentioned it, and it just came into my head just thinking about it, because I think this is also a big one for lots of men. You know, we're saying, you know, get fit, get healthy, and look after your well-being, but in actual fact there's quite a lot of men out there that already do that, but do it to the extreme. And I think over exercising,
you really,
and an over obsession with how you look or how strong you are or how fit you are, or being in competition with friends or gym partners, that can have a similar effect as not exercising at all. Because actually over exercising again releases cortisol, which impacts on testosterone levels, but also impacts on all other different parts of your body too. That can have a really negative effect. So I think there's a healthy balance that you have to achieve here. And it's kind of being more mindful of being in tune with yourself.
I think that's just like a manly thing, is a bit of an obsessive behavior. It's like, how can I be the best at everything? I need to be the strongest. I need to be this and that. And I think that is naturally in a man's, almost like genetically just built in.
Well, it comes from testosterone again. So it comes from higher testosterone levels.
Yeah, and that's also very normal. You know, we're not saying that you shouldn't be feeling like that, but it's how you manage those type of behaviors and how you manage your testosterone. And, you know, no extreme is good. So again, we all have to find a balance in life with everything that we do. And it comes down to half the times testosterone and how you deal with it, and how you go and smash the gym too much. That's not going to be good for you either. But not going, like you said, to the gym at all, that's not going to be good for you either. So try and find a level of what works for me and keeps me steady and helps me every single day of my life, basically.
I think it's awareness, isn't it? It's awareness of you, how you function, because everybody has different triggers, for example. So when we talk about kind of triggers and managing our emotions and developing healthy coping strategies, that goes to everybody across the board. That's part and parcel of being human. So I think one thing that we have to do as adults, whether you're male or female, you know, or whatever you identify as, I think it's really important that you acknowledge how you react and respond to your environment, and you take ownership of that. So whether you avoid certain triggers because you know that it's not going to be great for you, or whether in actual fact you recognize that you're responding quite negatively in certain situations, then take ownership of that, because only you can be the agent of change in your life. You have to manage ways of coping more effectively and take steps to be able to practice that on a daily basis so that it becomes a habit.
Yeah, and also it doesn't happen overnight. I think we need to stress that a lot, because, you know, again, that comes into a man's quick, let's fix things quickly now. And it doesn't happen like that. And unfortunately, with mental health especially, doesn't just come overnight and will not be fixed overnight. It doesn't matter how strong you are. It generally doesn't fix overnight.
I think an awareness of that as well, though, it's kind of taking a step back and actually acknowledging that maybe wanting to fix things is a certain trait of yours. Feeling like a failure when you can't fix things is a trait of yours. Responding aggressively to situations is a trait of yours. Dismissing other people's emotions and feelings is a trait of yours. Now, they could all be the trait of one person, or you could just have one or the other, you know, but it's important that you take responsibility of some of the negative coping strategies that you have, because that is the only way that you're going to be able to manage your mental health and be able to move forward.
Yeah, and we also all have negative coping strategies. That's, again, normal.
It's part of being human.
Exactly. So, you know, you realizing that you've got a negative trait and how you act in certain situation, that's literally the first step that you've taken, that baby step of acknowledgement. And then you decide what to do with it after that. Obviously, that's where your work comes in. Do I address it? Do I do something about it? Do I work on it? You know, slowly. You know, I'm not just going to change overnight, because you can't, because that's going to be a quick fix that's going to bite you, you know, later on. But I just think, again, like you said, and we stress this so much, like, just acknowledge your traits, your bad traits, and how you act in certain situations will help you in the long run. It always does.
Yeah, and I think you owe it as well to future,
yourself.
Future generations, especially if you've got children. I think this becomes even more important, because actually the way that you manage situations imprints on them and is highly likely how they're gonna learn to react in the future.
Yeah.
So I think, you know, it's great. Awareness months like this, I think, can often be criticised, because sometimes, you know, people say, oh, well, they're quite tokenistic, because it's all right, you know, oh, celebrate Men's Mental Health Month, but in actual fact, what's being done about it? And I think a lot needs to be done in terms of government and society and structural change. But in the meantime, there's lots that we can do as individuals to take those small baby steps just to change that narrative.
Yeah, so I think one last time, guys, if you feel like you're stressed or you don't know what to do, just go and speak to someone. Just speak.
And there's always options out there. We'll link them in our bio. There are people that you can speak to, because we absolutely recognize that not everybody has somebody to turn to.
Yeah, that's very true.
Wants to kind of be outed in a particular way. So there's lots of male specific helplines out there that people can call just to have a listening ear. And I think that is the ultimate crux of it. I think not a lot of people understand just feeling validated and having someone listen to you can quite often just be enough to get you through that moment.
Yeah, I know, that's so true. And I know, again, this sounds so simple, but it's so, you know, validation, again, is such a simple way of, you know, feeling better about yourself, you know, in any certain situation. But I just think that it's good that men are waking up to it a little bit more and realizing that it's not the end of the world if they say that they're not okay. And that in itself, I think it's great. And I genuinely hope that it'll get better with time. And then more people can just freely say, I'm having a shit day and I just want to have a pint with the lads, but talk about it. Actually talk about it, not just covering everything. And but this is literally today's episode.
It is. It's such an important
we will
topic.
pick up on it, I think, a bit more, because we do speak about this quite a lot between us two. And I hope you enjoyed this episode, guys. And please go and speak to someone. If you're feeling stressed, don't just sit there and just try and fix everything.
But also, thanks for listening. I think it's been a really important episode. And if you liked what we have to say today, please do like, share and subscribe. We always have to say that.
I know, it's getting a bit annoying, but we have to.
But that's ultimately what gets us visible. So if you think that what we've spoken about today could be beneficial to other men or even women who could potentially be struggling with partners or fathers or other men in their lives, then please do help us out by liking and leaving us a little comment. Much appreciated.
So thank you guys.
Thanks everyone.
Bye.